I'm really excited to go on this cruise because I think it'll be much better than just sitting in a classroom all day. It's hands-on, and I'll get a lot more experience out of it.
I hope to be part of the group of people that help push this research forward.
What I hope to get out of this project is to learn more about marine animals as well as learning about the ocean itself.
To get a better understanding of how life in the ocean works.
What I'm looking to get out of this trip is to learn more about the patterns of all these whales.
An understanding of how marine animals interact with one another and how they affect our lives.
I'm looking forward to broadening my horizons as far as what I'm studying.
And not everybody gets an opportunity to go out on a research vessel. It's important to share these experiences with the broader public, especially from a student perspective.
If I can inspire a flicker of interest in something that I'm already interested in, I've done the basic job of passing on a torch to a younger generation.
Not everyone gets a chance to be here at sea on a research cruise, but through the Inner Space Center, now we can bring you with us. Welcome aboard. Hi everybody, welcome to Endeavor Live. My name is Holly Morin and I'm a marine biologist with the Inner Space Center, and I will be your host today as we learn about the science that a group of 8 URI Honors students and the researchers on board the Endeavor are conducting here at sea. We're currently actually about 20 miles south of Martha's Vineyard, or about 45 miles, give or take, south of Block Island, which is where we kind of duck and covered last night because the weather, the seas kicked up yesterday, got a little rough for us, so we scooted back in to kind of anchor up off of Block Island or drift off of Block Island where it was a little bit calmer. And then this morning we stayed there while we did some earlier broadcasts to school groups, and then we were able to actually head further back out south to an area where whales have been sighted previously to start actually doing some marine mammal surveys and some other sampling as well. The students have been very busy while they've been out here on the vessel. They've been deploying a variety of instruments, including some Bongo Plankton nets. Those are 2 nets that are deployed side by side and sample very small critters that are in the water column. They've also deployed something called a visual plankton recorder, which is essentially a giant microscope that can take pictures really fast, like 60 pictures in 1 second. And that allows scientists to actually see the plankton without having to sample them via a net. And they've put other instruments, including those using underwater sound or acoustics, and one that's called a conductivity temperature depth, or CTD rosette, that measures different water properties as the instrument descends in the water column. In addition to those activities, they've also gotten up on the flying bridge, which is the area right above the deck where the captain is driving the boat, and that's where they're using something called big eyes to scan the surface or the horizon, looking for any signs of whales, so either their dorsal fins or their blows, their spouts when they come to the surface. Because ultimately that's what they're trying to do here, is look at where the whales have been distributed, where they're showing up, and trying to connect it to what's in the water for them to eat, the plankton, the fish, and then what other features of the water are there that are driving that overall marine food chain. During tonight's broadcast, I want to encourage everybody, if you can, to be sending in your questions. I know Andrea is at Whitehall in Kingston. You can give her your questions directly, or those of you that are tuning in via Facebook Live, you can type your questions in right there on the Facebook page. If you want to hashtag Endeavor Live, we'll see them. Gal is here today. She's going to be actually relaying her questions to us when Ethan, who's one of our URI Honors students, will be joining me in just a little bit. This is a very interactive experience for us. We're actually using something called telepresence to connect with you all today. And that is something that they've used with astronauts before. It's the same type of idea if we were doing FaceTime or Skyping, but what you're doing is you're able to connect with us in real time out on an oceanographic vessel. And what makes the Inner Space Center so unique is that we can actually connect with multiple ships at one time and stream their audio and visual data all at once through the internet, which makes us really makes that experience really great that you can watch that many ships at one time. How we're going to kick things off tonight, though, is to show you a really quick video that will introduce you more to the students that are on board the boat here and learn more about the work that they're going to be doing while at sea.
Personally, I think it's really important to communicate all of our findings so everyone has the same access to the same information and knowledge that we do.
Because as a student studying to become a scientist, I want to know what it takes to be a scientist out at sea.
I'm so excited to be participating in this cruise, actually, because I'm really curious about the whales and how their environment works.
I joined this class by accident, but I'm really happy I'm sticking with it because I've been exposed to so many different research methods and opportunities that I normally wouldn't have gotten.
Being from the Cape, I've heard about right whales my whole life, and I'm interested in learning more.
Because I'm really interested in the ocean, mainly because I'm from an island, I'm from Dominican Republic.
There's so many people out there who don't know what they want to do, and if I can inspire a flicker of interest in something that I'm already interested in, I think I've done the basic job of passing on a torch to a younger generation.
I think it's important to communicate science to the general public because we don't always understand how it affects our lives every single day.
To get people inspired and motivated into learning what's out there.
Because I want to learn about how the changing oceanographic landscape is affecting the whale's pattern and behavior.
To have the opportunity to learn about the preservation of endangered whales.
I was born in Israel and I moved here when I was 6 years old. And both my parents have a biology background, so that's why I became really interested in sciences.
As someone studying civil engineering, I'm looking forward to broadening my horizons as far as what I'm studying, what I'm researching. Instead of just concrete, now I get to study whales and see how statistics changes with that.
I'm a very outgoing person. I strive to be the best at anything I can try or be, you know?
There's a real value in communicating science to the public because not many people get the opportunity like we do. So being able to broadcast it to a huge audience is something that we're able to give to you.
What motivated me to join this class was that I had to fulfill my honors requirement. But what kept me in the class was the prospect of this week-long cruise out on the ocean. And I love boats, and that really got me excited for it.
So joining us now, we have Ethan Kapowski. Ethan is a sophomore ocean engineering major at the University of Rhode Island. And Ethan, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background and what made you decide to sign up for this class. Because an opportunity like this to go out on a research cruise and signing up for a class like this, I don't think is usually something a student selects to do.
Well, you know, you covered the basics. I'm a sophomore at URI, and I'm an ocean engineering major. And my love of the ocean really goes past a lot of my years back to the first time I saw the movie Jaws as a 5-year-old. Maybe not the best movie for a 5-year-old, but I was
Jaws at age 5.
entranced by the Cooper character, the scientist. And ever since then, I wanted to work with the oceans. And then I went to a marine science magnet high school. And my sophomore year, I was actually part of a MATS marine technology program for the students. And I was actually able to come to URI and work with the people, and I actually got a tour of this ship. And I never thought 4 years later I'd be actually going on a research cruise myself as a sophomore in college. And it's really interesting and exciting to get out in the field and do this in real time. And it just takes everything out of the classroom and into the real world.
The funny thing is, it shows you how small the oceanography or marine science can be, because the class that Ethan, or the course Ethan is talking about, was our marine technology for teachers and students, or the MATS project, which I was involved with as one of the instructors. And so he was in our first group of students that came from that marine science magnet school in Connecticut, and then went through our program building ROVs and other instruments. And then to come back on board and sit next to him the first time I was in the class was really kind of, it was fun and awesome to see him and see things go full circle in that sense. So what have you guys been up to? So today was kind of a different day where we actually got topside a little bit more. So why don't you talk about that experience and your marine mammal surveys, but also a lot of the deck work that you guys have been doing as well.
Yeah, so the last few days, we were out on the deck and we were deploying all the instruments, like you said, the CTD for the conductivity, the temperature, and the depth, and that was really cool. We were using slack lines to keep it under control with the rough seas, you know, making sure it's not a wrecking ball out there. And then on the other end of the spectrum, outside of the instruments, we're up on the top flying deck, I think it's called, that's right. And we've been looking for marine mammals, and unfortunately we haven't seen that many. You know, the conditions have been rough with the whitecaps, but I swear I saw a puffin today. No one else has proof. I think Erin, one of the other students, said she saw one too. So that's 2 right there. But it was just chilling there, and that's probably the coolest animal I've seen out there on the flying deck.
So what they've been using too to scan the surface for the marine mammals, I think I may have said it, was something called big eyes, or these giant binoculars with Ethan usually likes to use me as a scale, that they're, you know, twice as big as me or something like that. But they are high power binoculars that allow you to see very, very far. And so that way, if there was something far away from the boat, you could see it. And actually, it has a scale on it as well that allows you to estimate that distance, so you can keep track of where the animals might be. Are there any other instruments? I think you, what else, let's see, did you end up putting out the Bongo Nets? I think you were involved with deploying those as well. So how did that go?
Those are good. Those are those 2 drum-like metal nets, and they stretch out a couple meters, and then they have this big, well, not big, a little small bottle actually, at the end of these big nets. And so they're towed behind the ship, and depending on how thick the nets are, you can collect different sized animals. Some are really small, like the super small phytoplankton, and then some of the nets are bigger, so we can get the more zooplankton, the copepods, the little carnivores, which the whales are going to be feeding on.
And then when you guys brought the nets on board after they've been towed for a little bit, then what did you do? How did you actually get the stuff out of the net?
Well, we had to very carefully use these sieves and unwrap the tape from it, and then pour the whole bottle in from there. We had to work at getting the water out of the sieve, and it's such a fine mesh. It's kind of hard, and it's a time-consuming process. But then the real tedious work comes when you have to clean out the nets. You can't cross-contaminate each sample, and so it requires you to go along each little inch of the net and each little part of it with a hose and hope you get as much as you can out, so that each sample is from this spot and each sample is from the next spot, and it's not overlapping.
What was the actual sample like? Was it soupy? Was it gooey? Was it just watery? What color was it?
Oh, it was like if you go to a gym, you know, the random protein shake that you see some guy using. That was about the consistency, I'd say.
You had a protein shake come out of your bongo net.
Basically,
fantastic.
Nice and green and mulchy, kind of. You swirl your finger around there.
Makes sense why the whales would be eating it, because it's like a protein shake for them in the ocean.
Exactly.
Alrighty, so hopefully you guys have been sending in some questions while Ethan and I have been chatting here. And Gal, again, is here to have your questions. She'll be relaying them to us throughout the rest of the broadcast. Any questions that we don't get a chance to answer tonight during our live broadcast, we'll try to answer them online with the hashtag EndeavorLive. If you realize you have other questions that you want to ask us after the broadcast today, you can definitely put those up on our Facebook page or on Twitter as well. As long as you use that hashtag EndeavorLive, then we'll be able to find them and hopefully answer them for you. Actually, Gal, do you have any questions yet? And we can happily we can start that process.
Yep. So our first question is, what is it like to be abroad on a ship?
Okay, so our first question was, what is it like to actually be on the ship? So Ethan, how has it been on the ship for you? What are your day-to-day activities been?
Well, it definitely depends on the person. I know for myself, it's been a very enjoyable experience the whole way throughout. It's been such an escape from the real world. I love boats. I've always loved the ocean, and you know, you get rocked to sleep. The cooks are fantastic, you know. Every day they just work their butts off making the most unique meals that they can get, and it's all delicious. But I know some people, the constant rocking of the waves and the intensity of the previous days has led to some of us getting a little sick on the boat.
Were you anxious at all with the waves? And yesterday I know the waves were crashing over the side of the boat. I know you and your buddy Michael, you guys seemed okay though. You guys were out front looking at the waves, and Michael, by the way, is actually on the other side of the camera if everybody's wondering. So how was it? You guys weren't anxious at all with all the waves?
Oh no, they go through a great safety procedure at the beginning of the cruise, and they even made us try on these huge immersion suits. Those are those suits where you hear about a fisherman surviving in like Arctic temperature waters for like 5 days. They're really snug. They're not the most comfortable or hot, but I know they'd keep me safe if the boat's going down. There's all the lifeboats, and I was lucky enough to hold on to the rail the whole time, and the boat's pretty stable.
Yeah, excellent. Alrighty, so if we have another question, we'll be happy to answer that one.
So our next question is, how do whales communicate with one another?
How do whales communicate with each other? That is actually a very interesting question. Ethan, do you want me to tackle that one, or do you want to contribute?
I can add on anything that you miss.
Okay. So whales are, it depends, I guess, on what species of whale we might be talking about. So you want to remember there are two groups of whales. So you have baleen whales. Those are the ones that are filter feeders. They have the long hairs that hang from their top jaws that are made out of the same materials as your fingernails or your hair, so keratin. And they are usually filter feeding the small critters or fish out of the water. So those in our waters, those are going to be your right whales, your humpback whales, minke sei whales, and fin whales. And then you have your toothed whales, and those, if you want to think about that, they just have teeth, pretty straightforward. So your killer whales, all of your dolphin and porpoises, and your sperm whales. How they communicate is a little bit different. And so they actually don't know how baleen whales make sounds as of yet. They think they know, at least with humpback whales, they think they might have a balloon similar to our vocal cords that they use, and that vibrates to make sound. But then the cool thing about toothed whales is that one of their blowholes is actually closed off. They only have one on the top of their head, and it makes a bunch of air sacs inside their head. And they squeeze those in different ways to make different sounds, and then that goes out and is amplified through their forehead, through a fatty tissue they have in their forehead there. So they have different ways that they make sounds, but again, it's pretty common, same way we do it. They're vibrating something inside their body to make sound go out through the water.
Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know there was such a difference between the two species, but it's such a stress on how sound is so important to how they communicate, because we think of how we look at each other and hear each other, and most of how we communicate can be through sight. But if you think about where these whales are, it's full of phytoplankton and all these dense materials, and the water's thick with things. It's not like the crystal clear waters of the Caribbean. They can't really see that well. And it's such a stress on sound. There's actually one whale I heard about where her songs are decibels higher than the other whales, so she's never found anyone. It's really sad, but it really stresses how important the sound is just to find each other, you know, to mate and coagulate.
Yeah, they actually are usually separated by great distances, so that's how they're communicating over long distance. And then the other thing to remember too is after about 100 meters, it's dark. So if you're a deep diving species, you can't really see anything. So that's where sound also becomes very important. Gal, I think you actually have another follow-up question for us with regards to this topic.
I personally wanted to know, how do you know so much about whales, and where did you learn all of that information?
So how do I know so much about whales is because this is actually what my background is in. I have a master's in marine mammal science. So I actually worked with stellar sea lions in Alaska, and I was putting satellite tags on them to see where they were going, what habitats they were associating with, and where they were diving. And then after that, I actually went to go work for the National Marine Fisheries Service. Their office is up in Gloucester, and I was working with right whale management, looking at the interactions between right whales and fisheries gear. Unfortunately for right whales, there's less than 500 left in the North Atlantic right whale population, so they're what we call critically endangered. And they were hunted way back when because they were the right whale to hunt, because they were slow moving, they had lots of fat, and they swam very close to the surface. So when you harpooned them, they were very easy to retrieve, and then of course with all that fat yielded great profits. So unfortunately though, they've never recovered from that hunting, even though hunting doesn't happen anymore, because they are entangled in fisheries gear, or they also get struck by boats. So we're trying to work, and that's why this work is so important, is finding out where the right whales may be in addition to other species, so that we can better manage them and better conserve them. But that's been my background and my training all along. I am a straight up marine mammal ecologist, so I was super excited to be part of this cruise, because it was right in my wheelhouse and what I'm interested in and what I've been interested in since I was in 7th grade. So I'm right there with you, not 5 years old in Jaws, but I was 7th grade in a whale watch. So another question.
So our next question comes from Jason, and he's asking, how is it like using microscopes on the ship?
Jason, what an absolutely fantastic question. So Ethan, I know you were actually looking through the scopes earlier this morning at some of the samples we had from yesterday's Bongo Net tow. So why don't you talk about how that was working for you?
Well, it's funny. The big eyes were the only thing that have actually given me a little queasiness on the boat, but the microscopes haven't, which is interesting because it's still, you know, magnifying things. But the real difficulty with using a microscope on the boat is that you don't move and the microscope doesn't move, but the samples do, because they're in water. So I'm looking through the microscope, looking at this little tiny thing, I'm drawing the picture, and the next time I look for it, it's gone. It's the boat's tilted to one side and it's just flown out of the image. It's on the other side of the pallet, and then I'll go find it again and it'll go to the other side as the boat rocks back and forth. So that's one difficulty.
Well, the other thing too is sometimes the critters were still alive.
Yeah. And
so not only is the ship moving, but the animals were still moving inside the sample. So then you've got two things moving and you're staying stationary.
And I know some things were moving after other things. I know my friend Bradley, another student on board, actually was trying to keep another creature from eating the creature he was looking at. So that was a fun little thing for him to keep track of.
All in one little petri dish under one microscope. Gal, do you have any more questions for us?
So you said you were seeing right whales, and they were wondering, where did the name right whales come from?
So I kind of hinted to it, is that right whales were the right whale to hunt. So that was because what they feed, they actually are ram feeders. Actually, do you want to talk about how they feed? Because I know that you've talked about that before.
Yeah, sure.
So
the right whales feed by kind of skimming on the surface with their mouths open, and they just kind of ram into whatever food they're eating. And a lot of whales have different feeding tactics. Some of the whales will come up from underneath and get big gulps of water of the balls of the prey when their prey are all in one place, but the right whales kind of stay on top of there, and they kind of go after those zooplankton and copepods in the water. And so that made them an easy target. As far back as the 1700s, they started whaling from the Pyrenees Mountains in Spain. And from there it followed all through imperialism and colonization. It followed all the way from England to the New World, all the way up to the Pacific. And they were just the first whale that was always readily available in a new location for them to exploit.
How do you know all of this?
Maritime history
Nicely
classes.
done. There we go. I am impressed. Right, and so because they are ram feeders and they were swimming at the surface, that's why they're the right whale to hunt. They were slow moving, they were full of fat, and once you harpooned them, they just floated there for you, for you to then retrieve. They're the wrong whale right now, we like to say, unfortunately, because of everything else that's going on with their population. I think that is it for our questions, Gal, unless you have one more. Are we good?
We do have one more.
Okay.
And, it was, how many species of different plankton have you found?
Wow. How many species of plankton have we found? I honestly don't even know how many exact species of plankton that there are, except that there's a lot, thousands probably, and it depends on what species you might be talking about, whether you're talking about phytoplankton, which are your plant plankton, or zooplankton, which are the animal plankton. What are some of the plankton? Why don't we do this? Some of the plankton that you guys saw under the scopes.
Well, on our Instagram page, I know today, Gwen, one of the other students, Instagrammed out a pleurobrachia, which is a type of zooplankton, I think.
I think it's a ctenophore. It's a type of jelly, which is a type of zooplankton. Yep.
And those are kind of like those comb jellies you see that light up on the Planet Earth documentaries and all of that, and they're really cool. But then you have all the little amphipods. These little, they look like little shrimp there, but there's tons of species of those. I know there was a lot of juveniles that we couldn't even identify because they don't have the traits yet that can really set them apart from their adult counterpart species. And the list just goes on and on. It would be a better question to ask, how many species have we found in one Petri dish, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't even know, because we've all been kind of circulating and getting our own looks at it.
Yep.
It's impossible, I'd say, for one of us to know at this point.
The great thing, too, is that there are 2 plankton biologists or experts on board. So Dr. Karen Wishner, who's from the University of Rhode Island's Graduate School of Oceanography, and then we have Betsy Broughton, who's with the NOAA NIMS lab down in Woods Hole. So they've been drawing from their expertise as well. And when they don't know what something is, Betsy and Karen have stepped in and helped them identify it, which has been wonderful to watch. I think that this is where we're going to wrap things up, although Ethan, you gave me a great segue. He mentioned Gwen posted some pictures on Instagram today. I encourage you all to continue to follow along with us on all of our social media outlets, so Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The students have been taking over the Inner Space Center Instagram account, so Ethan had it yesterday, Gwen had it today. I'm not quite sure who we'll have tomorrow. It'll be a surprise. But they've been posting their pictures and sharing their experiences, so definitely follow along with them in that way. We have other Facebook Live events planned for tomorrow evening and then Saturday as well. So tune in live. Will be a different student that will be co-hosting with me, so you get to hear a different person's perspective about how the cruise has been going. And then also, if you have any other questions, you can feel free to post them using, again, the hashtag EndeavorLive. Please follow along, check out our website. And thank you, our audience, for joining us today. Thank you, Gal, for helping out with all the questions. Thank you, Ethan, for sharing your experiences. And we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. Bye now.